Okay, welcome to another edition of AP World History at University High School. We're in chapter 26 here, and we're talking about two extremely important events in Europe in the 19th century, and that is the unification of the countries of Germany and Italy. So yes, of course, the German people have been there for a very long time, and the Italian people have been there for a very long time, thousands of years, both of them. And they've had German states and Italian states, that is countries, but never a single nation state. Um, so this happens here in the late 19th century, and the map of Europe further takes shape. So I told you that before that this theme of nationalism is possibly the most important one of the 19th century. So let's start with Germany. But first, a review of what nationalism, right? So nationalism, or a nation of people, isn't necessarily their race or even just their language. It can be those might be two elements of it, but it's a whole lot of stuff. Their culture, like the shared beliefs, possibly in the way of life. Maybe their beliefs about human rights, beliefs about. I mean, it could be anything from food to language, their common history, possibly a common religion, all sorts of things that bind people together, and they identify as a nation, right? So here, Germany and Italy will form as nation states. Nation states. So here is Germany, and here is Italy. These are going to be our starting points. And it's Europe in 1815. So 1815 is a crucial year. Remember what happened in 1815? That's right. Napoleon was finally defeated at the Battle of Waterloo, which is not really on the map. It was in Belgium. And after his exile to the island of, what was the island? It wasn't Elba, it was the other one, Helena? Anyway, the Congress of Vienna did this to the map of Europe. So Prussia gained some territory here. Prussia was one of the largest German states. It was pretty powerful. And here is another German state called Austria. Yes, they're both German. Austria is right around here, but you can see the Austrian Empire is really big. And it actually encompasses a lot of different ethnicities. And therefore, nationalism is actually going to have kind of a negative effect in Austria. Okay, so let's get started. Oh, by the way, so within this whole territory is a bunch of other smaller German states. It says the lesser German states. There's Saxony and Bavaria and Westphalia, and I don't know what others. So here we go. Prussia in purple. See the Prussia? And that's Prussia before 1866. And then areas that were conquered by Prussia in 1866, and then Austrian territories that were excluded from the North German Confederation in 1867, and then areas that joined with Prussia to form the North German Confederation, yada, yada, yada. So it is modern-day Germany was formed around the expansion of this state here called Prussia, not to be confused with Russia, which you can see is right next door. So Prussia is the mover and the shaker. So in 1815, this German Confederation was formed again after that Congress of Vienna, and it replaced that Holy Roman Empire. And the Holy Roman Empire was established in like 968. Remember, it was by Charlemagne's descendants, and it was dismantled by Napoleon sometime in the early 19th century. So that German Confederation is kind of this loose agreement, this loose confederation or political association of 39 separate independent German states. The two largest of these states are Prussia and Austria. And Austria had formed into an empire itself by the 19th century, being able to absorb or annex, look up annex if you don't know what that means, or even conquer other parts of Central and Southeastern Europe. So there's this rivalry now, because these are the two largest German states, Austria and Prussia. So let's start with Austria. So Austria and Prussia here. What is the makeup of these two empires? Well, Austria, as we looked on a map before, is a multinational empire. And as a result, they suffered some uprisings and revolutions throughout their existence, but they were a major power in Europe. And they had some specific uprisings in Italy here in the 1870s. and also wars with France, Italy, and Prussia in the 19th century, as we'll see. So the Austrian Empire is going to be threatened by nationalism because it's a multinational empire, just because of its makeup. Prussia, on the other hand, is primarily a German population. As a result of the work of one guy primarily, they're going to build up a powerful army in the late 19th century, um, and that might be too strong of a word, authoritarian government, but it's a pretty centralized government with a strong monarch. Um, and they were able to industrialize very rapidly in the late 19th century, and they became one of the most scientifically advanced and industrialized countries in the world at the turn of the 20th century. Another thing that began to bind German states together was this idea of a Zollverein. Do you remember what the Zollverein was? It was this economic union that was formed with Prussia as the mover and shaker there. It eliminated tariffs among the various German states. A tariff is a tax on imports and exports. So now they can trade more freely, and therefore an idea of a German nation can lay roots more easily. But it's still politically fragmented until this guy. He's a very, very important person in the 19th century and maybe really in the history of the whole world. Otto von Bismarck is probably most responsible for the creation of the nation of Germany. So he comes from this social class called the Junker. I know it's kind of a funny name. The Junkers were a conservative, aristocratic class. So conservative meaning they weren't necessarily into the political ideas of the age, which were like republican in nature, lowercase r, which was representative and increasing democratic principles. Instead, he believed in the traditional conservative political order. He was named chancellor by Germany's first king. His name was King Wilhelm I, or William I, but Wilhelm. But the German king isn't called a king. You know what the German king was called? If you said Kaiser, from the Latin Caesar, or the Russian Tsar, you'd be correct, Kaiser. So we'll talk about his story and how he did this in a minute here, but in just 10 years, Bismarck would unify all of Germany under Prussian rule. So it started with militarization. That might be a stereotype you have about Germany, but it was true here in the late 19th century, building up a very strong military with the latest technology and reorganizing it. They wanted to spend more money on the military, but Parliament refused. And Otto von Bismarck made this famous speech sometime in the 1860s that became known as the Blood and Iron speech, because he used those words in his speech, and it said, a little excerpt, "Germany does not look to Prussia's liberalism, but to her power." Liberalism, by the way, this is in the context of the 19th century, and it's one of your note card terms for the chapter. It refers to, the increased ideas of representative government and human rights, and you could say that this Western liberalism is eventually also going to lead to women's suffrage in the early 20th century. So Prussia doesn't look to that, but to her power. The great questions of the day are not decided by speeches and majority resolutions. That was the mistake of 1848 and 1849. Go back to chapter 21 to know what 1848 was. But by blood and iron. That is war. And so the brand of politics that he is known for is called realpolitik. Realpolitik, that it's really hard to define, but it's kind of in the name. That is realistic politics. That is politics based on practical matters. That is doing what is necessary to achieve a certain goal for your state or for your political party or whatever it is. This could mean manipulation. This could mean going back on promises. Whatever is necessary. Political theory, ethics, those aren't necessarily the most important thing, but instead practical matters. And Otto von Bismarck certainly did some things that were pretty controversial, but achieved some really great things as a result. So often these can result in pretty ruthless decisions. again, without regard for ethics or anything like that. So what does realpolitik look like in practice? Okay, well, first of all, we have to start with the fact that when Napoleon invaded, like 50 years before, that sparked a German nationalism. That tends to happen when a foreigner comes to your country and occupies it and goes to war with it. All these various German states were like, hey, wait a minute. And so nationalism was definitely kindled among the German people. So using this, Otto von Bismarck used from his role. By the way, his role was the prime minister at this time. In Germany, the title was called chancellor, and it was through militarization, building up the military, but also using this nationalism. They invaded Denmark to their north and captured two territories called Schleswig and Holstein. Schleswig and Holstein. That was in 1864. And so those northern states were now brought under the sphere of Prussia. They were Germans. Most of the people in those states were Germans. So I don't remember the excuse that was made to invade there. But after that, a war with their southern neighbor and rival, Austria. The Austro-Prussian War of 1866 added some of Austria's German states to the realm of Prussia. It's still called Prussia at the time, not Germany. But really, the last and most important war of all was a war with the most powerful country in Europe at the time, in continental Europe, and that was France, their neighbor to the west. So this one we'll talk about in a little greater depth here, and that was in 1870, the Franco-Prussian War. So how did this happen? Well, there's this growing rivalry between France, who at the time is headed by Napoleon III. That's Napoleon Bonaparte's, grandson or nephew. I forget. Anyway, related to Napoleon, but even France at this time is it's much more of a constitutional monarchy and will move to a full democracy very soon here. And so there's this growing economic and military rivalry between the two nations. And when the Spanish throne is offered to a relative of Kaiser Wilhelm, of King Wilhelm, the French don't like that because, now a German will be on the throne of France as well. So they protested this, and so Bismarck was able to rally all Germans. How did he do this? So here's an example of his cunning and why he's considered such a skillful politician. There's this letter called the Ems Dispatch. So what he did was he took a press release, this is for newspapers, and he rewrote it. He rewrote it and he released it in the press. And what he wrote in there was that the Kaiser, the German Kaiser, insulted the French ambassador. So this kind of makes his own Kaiser look bad, right? But why did he do this? He did this to try to provoke the French. He wanted the French king, he wanted Napoleon III, essentially to get mad enough that they'll declare war. Have the French ever done that before? Well, we know they did that in Algeria. So, yeah, maybe they took out another leather glove and slapped the German ambassador in the face with it. I don't know. But Napoleon III declared war on Prussia as a result, which is exactly what Otto von Bismarck wanted, and it was on to Berlin for the French. France attacked Prussia. Prussia was militarily superior by this time, and so France was defeated pretty easily and humiliatingly. Napoleon III surrendered, and he was even taken captive. And this is kind of like the modern era. So what you see here is the treaty that ended the Franco-Prussian War in 1870. And do you recognize the building at all? I've showed you pictures from my travels. It's the Hall of Mirrors. It's at Versailles, which is built by the Sun King, Louis the 14th. So this is pretty much where the nation of Germany was created, with the signing of this treaty. France had to pay for the cost of this war. They paid $1 billion, the equivalent of about $1 billion, and they gave up these two provinces on their eastern frontier, on their eastern border with Germany, called Alsace and Lorraine. And it's important you remember those two because the French will be just having bitter feelings and looking for a revenge for this for quite a long time as a result. So this rivalry between France and Germany is definitely going to continue. So this is a period that, well, later on, the Nazis are going to call the Second Reich, this period of growth under Otto von Bismarck, and the reunification of Germany. So Germany is now a country, a nation state. All right, let's move on to Italy. So check out Italy. Italy is the Kingdom of Sardinia, Tuscany, the Papal States, more of the Papal States, the Kingdom of the Two Sicilies, and Naples, and Venice, and Lombardy. It's a bunch of states, right? They're almost all Italians. These two areas up here, Lombardy and Venice, were under the control of the Austrians, while the French claimed influence, I forget, in one of these two areas. Anyway, there's foreign influence as well. So it's fragmented, okay? Oh, that's going to be annoying. So Italy's divided into a whole lot of smaller states. And the Congress of Vienna had redivided Italy and put much of it under Austrian or Spanish control, because again, there was no nation of Italy, or nation state anyway. So it's important, it's fragmented. So what problems do they have with unification? There were regional differences. Even today, people like in the South and in Naples, they're kind of looked down upon by people in the North who think they are sort of superior to the Southerners. Notice a common theme there. Austria was ruled by Austria ruled northern Italy, so there's another problem, foreign powers in charge there. And then the Catholic Church actually controlled most of central Italy. Those were called the Papal States, and they didn't necessarily want to give up that land to a secular authority, right? The Pope is, Catholic, Christian. So we're really gonna go through this just by profiling three people, because the actual events of it aren't all that important. The events of how Germany was unified is kind of important, basically using a method of warfare to kindle nationalism. But with Italy, what's more important is these people that we profile here. Giuseppe Mazzini, nicknamed kind of like the heart of the movement. Why? Well, he was this rebel who founded this organization called Young Italy, and it was a nationalist society. So he was considered a liberal nationalist during the 19th century. So he wanted to establish kind of a republican-style government that is representative government based on the movement of that period, and to establish a nation state, not based on regional differences and aristocratic traditions. So he worked in that revolution of 1848, which failed. He was exiled. He was kicked out of the country for his views. But his writings and his speeches continue to inspire the nationalist movement in Italy. That's why he's nicknamed the heart. The brain, you could say, of Italy's birth as a nation was this guy Camillo Cavour. He was a statesman, meaning he was a politician. He was the prime minister of, that should say Sardinia, no, Sardinia. He's the prime minister of Sardinia. So he worked to cement some alliances with foreign powers. First, strengthen the economy and then form foreign alliances for the purpose of, kicking out the Austrians especially. So he was able to, through some of these foreign alliances, launch wars to gain lands, especially in the north. We're talking about Lombardy and Venice. And he did that by, I think it was an alliance, it's either with the French or Germany. I think it was the French. I think it was the French. And through that, they were able to expel the Austrians from northern Italy. So his tools were diplomacy and making these foreign alliances to drive the Austrians from power in northern Italy. And lastly, the sword. So you got the heart, the brain, and now the sword. Who is this person? A soldier who was a member of Young Italy that was founded by Giuseppe Mazzini. This is Giuseppe Garibaldi. So he led a volunteer army known as the Red Shirts. The Red Shirts were like, a military nationalist group. So he actually spent many years in exile, but he was able to form this army in exile of red shirts, and he won control of southern Italy through the Kingdom of Naples, I believe, and was able to unite it with the north, which was reconquered from Austria. So he'd wanted to establish a republic, but ultimately, in order to achieve first, more importantly, unification, in order to achieve that unification, he compromised, and Italy became a kingdom. So it was a unification of the kingdom of two Sicilies to the Sardinian king Victor Emmanuel. So Victor Emmanuel was the first king of Italy. The second king of Italy is going to be Victor Emmanuel II, if I'm not mistaken. And there's, anyways, a giant monument to him in Rome if you go. I think it's kind of tacky. It doesn't look like anything else in the city, so it looks kind of out of place. So these three guys, the head, heart, and sword, Mazzini, Cavour, and Garibaldi. So here is Garibaldi entering Naples with the red shirts, and notice the tricolor flag, which didn't exist before the creation here of the nation of Italy. And here is Garibaldi and I don't know who. So this is before and after. Again, these various states. And then during the period of unification, this happened 1870 in Italy, 1871 in Germany. So let's recap really fast. So we saw the nationalism in Germany and Italy worked to unify those two countries, but look at the Austro-Hungarian Empire. This area in orange here, these are Romanians. So you'll see after World War I, all this is going to be added to Romania, and that's where I was born, Timișoara. And that used to be part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Anyway, if you go to that city, anything that's beautiful is pretty much built by the Germans. So you see here Hungarians, Romanians, Germans, all sorts of Croats and Serbs, Czechs, Slovaks, many different people. So we see different nations. And in Austria, nationalism is going to work to cause tension and actually work to tear it apart. We know that that was the case in the Ottoman Empire, which you see here, a map we've seen before. All their losses throughout the 19th century as nationalist movements in Greece and Bulgaria and Albania and Romania, in Serbia, gradually pick away at it, and Egypt as well. And lastly, what is this? This is Russia. So you don't really have a lot of perspective here, but this is basically Eurasia right here. So Russia as well, a very multi-ethnic empire actually. There were Russians and Ukrainians and Belarusians and Tatars and Uzbeks and Turkmen, Georgians and Chechens and all sorts of different peoples throughout this whole empire. So even there, the czars would have troubles with various ethnic groups and people that didn't want to be ruled by the Russians. So that is a key difference there. All right, thank you for tuning in, and come again next time.